Hello and welcome to Seattle City Makers. I'm your host, Jon Scholes. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our latest episode. I'm joined by Tod Leiweke. He is the CEO of the Seattle Kraken. He took that role in 2018, leaving a post with the National Football League where he served as chief operating officer for a number of years. Prior to being COO of the NFL, he was the CEO of the Seattle Seahawks. He's held a number of executive level roles across multiple sports leagues, the NFL, the NBA, MLS, and the NHL. He's had a long and distinguished career in sports, and we're lucky to have his fingerprints on so many great franchises here in Seattle. He was part of launching the Sounders, was there to hire Pete Carroll 14 or so years ago at the Seattle Seahawks, and has built an incredible brand and franchise with the Seattle Kraken. We sat down at the Iceplex, their practice facility and administrative offices, and where they've got 3 sheets of ice that I think 1 million or so people are getting to skate on in the course of a year, their community Iceplex. We sat down there to have a conversation, pretty wide-ranging conversation on Tod's background, of course, the Kraken and their playoff hunt, his favorite sports memories. We talked a little bit about Pete Carroll's recent transition from the Seahawks, since Tod was there to announce his hiring 14 years ago. We discuss what the Kraken, through their foundation, the One Roof Foundation, have proposed for the remake and remodel of Memorial Stadium at Seattle Center. We discuss a bit about leadership and the team's approach to community and social impact in Seattle. And we put our standard questions to Tod, his first job where he took a paycheck, and his perfect Saturday in the Seattle area. We broaden it just a bit to the Pacific Northwest. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Seattle Kraken CEO, Tod Leiweke. Well, you're really gracious to do this during the season. So thank you first for making time.
No problem. And, we won last night.
Well, I was going to say, and I was really glad that we're doing this after a victory.
It would have affected the tone of this a little bit.
It would have. You wear the wins and losses on your sleeve, don't you?
Well, I think anyone in this business who cares,
yeah.
You do get impacted a little bit. But I got my sleep last night, so let's get after it here, man.
And you've had it's been a bit of a roller coaster season. It's been streaky.
Yeah, and it's what you sign up for. We just played 3 games in 5 days. Won 2 of the 3, took a point in the other game. But even taking a point in overtime, we're still teaching people hockey. And hey, there's 2 points with a win, 1 point for an overtime. And if you get a point in a game, it's a good thing. Yeah. So we're right now 2 points out of a playoff spot, a wild card spot, and play San Jose here coming up, and then it's. The guys get a little bit of a break, and onward we go.
How do you manage the mood and the culture and the vibe in the administrative offices, in the front offices where we're sitting, when things aren't going so well on the ice and you don't have day-to-day control over it? Like, what's it like when you walk in here after a tough stretch?
Well, we haven't had all that many. I'd say that first year was a little bit challenging, but, there's so much other good that goes on here. Mm-hmm. And our focus is to build, a world-class hockey team, but we have other things we're building, and we're building it for the long haul. So perspective's really, really important. And, you take a loss hard, and some fans do, but most people who show up at the building are having a wonderful time. They're seeing the good parts of our beautiful city. They're riding public transportation. They're walking through this beautiful campus. And you got to keep all that in mind. But I'm not one to sort of just wallow in praise. I think you get better by also saying, well, what can we do better? Mm-hmm. And the fine line is vesting in what we can do better while also keeping a perspective that we've made a heck of a lot of progress here. I've been after this for 6 years. We've still got things to do, but we've made a lot of progress.
In the second season into the playoffs, deep into the playoffs, not a bad
that was great.
Entry point.
People saw, people who came saw what playoff hockey is, and the NHL is today such a healthy league. A tremendous amount of parity. Home ice advantage used to count for a lot, and it matters a heck of a lot less now. But that playoff run was really cool, and that game where we beat Colorado here in Game 6 was a thrilling event.
It was a new experience for me, that was for sure.
Yeah.
As I think, many in this
Yeah.
market. But the intensity and speed of playoff hockey versus regular season was just
Well, the
unbelievable.
regular season's pretty intense too, but I think hockey is a sport that it's not a sport where you see it the first time and instantly get it. Shifts are a minute long, and people are like, "Why?" Because it's a dead-out sprint. And if you're on the ice for 2 minutes, and we saw this in the game last night, the other team does fatigue, and all of a sudden space gets created. And so learning all of that takes time, learning the journey of all these players. There are a bunch of guys who moved here who came from other places, but they came here because they were best in the world at what they did. And each one has an amazing journey. And our hardcore fans understand not just the players, they understand their journeys, they understand the prospects that we have in the system. I'm so proud of the prospects and the players that are, many of them playing junior hockey that have been drafted. We drafted 28 players in our first 3 years, and I think our draft class is just outstanding. These are the players of the future, and they're having huge success in these other. And then we've got what I think is the best team in all of the American Hockey League down in Coachella Valley, playing in a brand new arena, playing in front of really big crowds. So, the future's bright, but there's another team that'll someday come and join us, and we can talk about that a little bit if you'd like.
Yeah, there's a lot for us to cover given your extensive career across multiple sports. I mean, I think you were described as a 3-sport athlete, but I think it's actually 4, right? With your tenure in the NFL, NBA, soccer, and NHL, of course. So I want to talk about the Kraken, talk about what you all are proposing for Memorial Stadium on the campus of Seattle Center. And we're kind of at this interesting moment in sports. It feels like across the country and across lots of leagues, with TV viewership way up in the NFL, but also in other leagues, franchise values way up, the interest in sports seeming to be never higher. So I want to get your perspective on kind of where we are generally in sports. And there's some interesting local sports stories of late too, with Pete Carroll's transition away from the Seahawks. But maybe first, just your background for those who aren't as familiar. How does a guy who grew up in a small county in Missouri of 8,000 folks, where half the people were below the poverty line,
Good job, John.
Didn't
it was 6,000, but half were below the poverty line.
Small county in Missouri.
Yeah.
Facing a fair amount of adversity. You lost your mom early, stepmom as well, and you didn't graduate college. How does somebody with that background become the CEO of the Seahawks, COO of the NFL, CEO of the Kraken, and a few gigs in between? What's been your secret to success?
Dumb luck. I would say, actually, I think many people find a way to take adversity and turn it into opportunity. And so my adversity was real. We grew up in St. Louis, but my mother passed. My father remarried. My father and my stepmother decided they wanted to pursue a simpler life. We moved to a small town. It was rough. They went broke. They didn't have a lot of money to begin with, and they went broke. But then when I was a junior in high school, my stepmother wasn't feeling well and was diagnosed with terminal cancer, so I lost 2 mothers before 17. My stepmother said to me, "I'm not going to make it. You are. Make the most of every day." And I never forgot it. And I didn't not only not graduate from college, I never went to college. I went right to work. But I never really forget what she said. And I also had a strong desire to try and find something better. But those lessons early on caused me to relate to people in a different way than perhaps other people, where I would see someone who's a little down and out, and I had a connection to them, and I still do. My advantage was my skin color. My advantage was how I physically appeared, where people would come up to me and say, "Well, where did you go to school?" And I always thought, if not for the color of my skin, this could have been an entirely different journey. And I have strong feelings about that. Strong feelings about people who don't have the same color of skin I have, or immediately discriminated against, because that's all it would have taken for me to have not gotten my start. But once I got my start, I had an engine and wanted to keep going. And I've had great experiences, but along the way, the greatest privilege of the journey has been helping and supporting community, and that's what professional sports and sports do. And I think that is a little bit unique to our society and in some ways our country. I would humbly submit that our country has taught other sporting organizations about the deep impact you can have on community. And I think if you're a self-respecting owner in professional sports today, there is a community agenda. We've made it under Mari Harita's leadership and with the support of an entire organization a major, major priority. And win or lose, we know we can win in the community no matter what the final score of the game. And that is a real motivating thing.
And community impact, social impact today, in the way that you all are approaching it and other teams in this market, seems to mean a lot more than it did maybe 10, 20 years ago, where you show up with the check and take a photo and then make your way back to the office or the arena or the stadium. How are you all approaching it, and why are you approaching it differently?
Well, I think there are I think there's ways we can all have deep impact, and I'm so proud of the other teams in this market because at some level we all share real commonality. My friend Adrian Hanauer at the Sounders, the great work of the Mariners and what they've done, the Seahawks, the Storm. And so, there's other teams. There's the Seawolves. And so I think that the teams here do a lot for community. And I think it's a good thing because I think that these organizations do have a platform different than another business, perhaps of our size or the number of employees. We have a unique platform. We can make a difference. And when you buy into that, and you invest in that idea, then it becomes potent. And, we can't solve all sorts of things. I wish we could, but we can definitely impact the community on a local level in a real way. And I'd like to think we've done it, knowing that our best days are totally in front of us. I know we're going to talk about Memorial Stadium, but that's a classic example of how we can really impact. And I'm really excited to see what those impacts are going to be.
Is there a little competition between the teams in town around community impact, friendly competition?
No, I think Mari has done a wonderful job. I know, most of the folks at the teams, but, at the next level down, perhaps there's some potential for that. But I think Mari and the others meet on a regular basis. They share glasses of wine. They talk. They work together. So, no, I don't think there is competition. I think the competition is how do we make the community better? Because, cities and communities have faced enormous and very unique challenges here in the last number of years. I think there's anxiety in our world today that is almost greater than any other time. And some of that's been fueled by social media, but, it has for many people been a very unsettling time. And I think that teams working together can help really, aid that issue and bring comfort to people and bring hope.
And you mentioned all that, and polarized time, and also a time where there's more content available than ever before. On your couch, on your phone, Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus. But sports seem to be more popular than ever. You look at NFL viewership and franchise values and attendance. What do you make of that, and just the popularity of sports in a time with a lot of competition for eyeballs and money and people's energy, and also a lot of polarization?
Yeah, I think it's escape for people. So when you say, well, why does somebody come and cheer so hard for this black object to cross this red line, and why is it so important? And if it doesn't happen, why do you have trouble sleeping? And I think that it's, I think it is escape. I think people get to come to our buildings and forget about the daily problems or the challenges at the office or budgets with the business, and engross in something that is sort of greater than all of us. Mm-hmm. And when you see that happen, it's quite inspiring. Sports have become more popular because those stories are getting better told. People are starting to really understand the athletes and the journey. the more they get to know our players, the more they're going to like them because they're amazing. And you don't get to this level, competing at that level night after night, time-tested competitions by not having some special things. And people then live vicariously. They see a player, facing a tough, series of games and somehow getting their act back together and overcoming that. They see a team going down by 2 goals and overcoming that. And then sometimes being up by 2 goals and not overcoming it. And then what do you do that next game? How does the team and how do you create hope? Sports has, proverbial hope because the best teams draft last and the worst teams draft first. And, that goes through a whole cycle. Sports aren't the end all, but I'm proud of this business. I'm proud of the industry, and I'm very proud of what we've done. And Seattle's a wonderful place if you're in the sports business, that's for sure.
You mentioned Memorial Stadium. You all have made a proposal to the city and school district, and were selected by both to remake Memorial Stadium. What are you proposing, and why did you decide to submit?
Well, first, we care a lot about the campus, but what's happened in that stadium for decades and decades has been pretty material, important stuff in our community. When we read the initial RFP submitted by both the school district and the city, we did not see any commercial purpose whatsoever. And it was encouraging both community activation and activism, but also commercial, if there was a commercial purpose. And a credit to our organization and our gut and our ownership, we looked at and saw no commercial purpose. We saw an opportunity to substantially improve the campus and an opportunity to truly impact the Seattle Public Schools and the students who play there. So really borrowing the principles of the One Roof Foundation led by Mari, we responded to that RFP and basically said, with zero profit motive, we will give this everything we have, but let's make it great. Some said it won't work. Some said you're not going to be able to get through the politic of dealing with the school district or the city. Now, we got a long way to go on this project, but the fact is that we're totally inspired by that partnership. It's inspiring to see the school district and the city working collectively.
You weren't deterred by the years of them not working so collectively.
Well, I think that some of that's urban myth. I think that, people said the same thing about us in dealing with the city. I remember speaking at the Rotary.
On the arena.
Yeah. And a guy stood up and said, I just want to say when you sleep with the dogs, you get fleas. And so, I'm like, And I informed him that my golden retriever did climb in the bed every night, and I slept with the dogs, and I had no fleas. And then said, if you're talking about the city, but in fact, look what we did with the city. We not only built a privately financed arena, we saved a historic landmark and did solid by our city. And how do we do that?
Pandemic.
Yeah, in the middle of a global pandemic. How do we do that? With the full support of the city. Robert Nellums, Marshall Foster, the mayor, all the department heads, transportation. So urban myth is that the city is really difficult to deal with and it's impossible. And we have our challenges. But during that period of time, I moved from Mercer Island into Seattle. And why? I wanted to be a little closer to the arena, but I also felt very strongly that our city was being characterized in ways that wasn't entirely fair. And there are things to be worked on. But as you work on things, you've also got to take the stock of the things that are working. And, I firmly believe that our city's best days are in front of us. And when you look at what's happening just on the waterfront, and Maggie Walker and a private group stepping in and leading a conservatory that's going to not only get the project done, but run it. This is epic. This is the biggest civic project in the history of the city, taking down the viaduct. And we didn't take down the viaduct. A natural act, or earthquake, took down that viaduct. But that was a city that was industrial and didn't place great value on being on the water. And you'd have to go back to the First Nations people who've cherished living by the water and found great deep inspiration. Mm-hmm. We put up a highway. And I think it was perhaps the right decision at the right moment for what the city was at that point in time. But then our city continued to evolve into a world-class place. We've incubated more ideas per capita in this city than any city in the world, in my opinion, in the last 20 or 30 or 40 years. And this city deserves to have a great waterfront that's an inspiration, a symbol of our city, and it's happened. And what they've done on the salmon habitat, the translucent glass on the waterfront, and that's on the front end. Let's give it 10 or 20 years and see what happens.
Yeah, not even open yet.
The transit system that's now going to connect, that's going to make our system bigger than DC's metro. The willingness of people like you and me to ride transit, which differentiates our community. Because when all walks of life are willing to ride transit, it takes a different place in our society. And transit's a great equalizer. It's not only good for the environment and it's good for traffic and congestion, but it's a great equalizer because cars are expensive. And maybe you and I don't really look at it that way because we have good jobs. But there's lots of people that are dependent upon transit and can't afford other means of transportation.
And it's been pretty key to get people to the arena and to the Iceplex where we sit today, right? You're sitting on
the arena,
the two transit lines.
I know we only have a certain block of time. We could devote it all to the sustainability efforts and, the pride that we have in Amazon challenging us to be the Climate Pledge Arena and what we did to get there. But then the outcomes, we bought in with Tom Albro, 50% of the monorail system went to the city and said, if we do these things, will you extend the concession? They did. Dramatic improvements to the monorail, private sector money that we put in, but we also effectively got federal money. And we fixed the one side at Westlake, major improvement to that station. And now we're working on the other side where people load and unload at the same time. We also embedded an Orca pass in every ticket sold at the arena. Lo and behold, this big thing that the pundits and the negative people said was going to be the downfall of the arena, which was traffic, it didn't happen. And again, I live not always on the positive side, but I remember the night before the building opened, waking up in the middle of the night saying, oh my gosh, are we going to have parking Armageddon?
Did you have memories of the Sonics playing in the Coliseum and the Key and traffic on Denny and Mercer? And it was
Mercer mess, but
all that.
Things changed, but we also took proprietary interest in a guy named Rob Johnson, who was on the city council, came and led a lot of those early transportation initiatives. And, we got people to park back. They back into the stalls, made a huge difference. We directed people to garages that actually were adjacent to on-ramps that were closer to where they lived. And then on some nights, as many as 25% of the people taking public transportation. And, there's lots to work on still with the guest experience, but transportation wasn't the runaway leader of the list of issues. There's still things we want to do, and there's still improvements we want to make. But, we also funded transportation. It was interesting because the street in front of the arena went from being 3 lanes to 1 lane effectively. There was a bus lane and a bike lane, and who would have thunk? That, part of doing this was not just saying how does transportation work for our events, but how do you improve transportation as an overall city? And our city does have courage. There's a lot of people who work in city government who work hard at their jobs who I have a great respect for.
Yeah, and to your earlier point that we get big things done in this city, and it's often through the public-private partnerships you just described, and maybe some are overly critical and maybe in some cases inaccurate about our ability to accomplish those things. So you approach this Memorial Stadium project with a lot of confidence in what can get done with the district
so I'll give you just the quick thumbnail. The school district passed this, and Memorial Stadium was built in 1947, so it superseded the World's Fair. It was the centerpiece of the World's Fair, but amazing things happened there. football games, high school games, the birth of the Sounders, the birth of the Rain, concerts. So many people you meet in the community have some memory somewhere along the way of something happening that they witnessed in that stadium. But it effectively hadn't been changed since 1947. And the school district had lots of issues and challenges, and they finally realized that, at some point in time, we're going to have to fix this or condemn it. They passed a $66 million bond issue. That would have built, a pedestrian stadium, aluminum bleachers, a chain link fence, not a whole lot of others because you had to do the demolition and clean the site to build the aluminum stadium. And I think the city appropriately said, gosh, we should hope for more for our campus. So they then worked collaboratively with the school district and came up with a vision, and the city then put $40 million in. So now you were notionally at $100 million, and then we said, what could be? What if we raised some private sector money? What if we really talked about blurring the lines between the stadium and the campus? And what's happened since 1947 is lots of weeds have grown, lots of brush have grown. There is a large rat colony that's going to have to find somewhere else to call home. But it became an imposing place on the campus. And so
It's sort of walled off from the rest of what's going on.
It is, and you can't really see the campus but the models and the design that is now, it's just a spectacular facility. And the west side overlooks the International Fountain. The memorial wall gets completely refurbished. A wall that talks about, hold the torch high, justice and tolerance and liberty. And every student who died in World War II, their name is on that wall. And it says on the wall explicitly, lest we forget. And some of the names are no longer legible. And just the thought that we're going to take that wall and we're going to resurrect it and we're going to have those names legible again. And we hope on the other side of the wall to create a format where today's students can interpret those words, which are more powerful today almost than they were back then. So Memorial Stadium is going to be incredible. It's going to be a great shot in the arm for the school district. Friday night lights are going to be incredible. There's going to be community access. There are going to be other professional teams that will incubate there. It's going to be a phenomenal addition, and it's going to lift up the rest of the campus. But the students are what we're really excited about.
And preserving that access and opportunity for
them and
other kids.
And as we've talked through this with, Fred Podesto is the COO of the school district. He and Dr. Jones have been fantastic. And I actually saw the mayor yesterday and showed him some of the most recent renderings. He played there. And, he's actually in the Seattle Public Schools Hall of Fame, which right now is kind of in an administrative building and not very well known, but there's some amazing names on that, and that's going to have a place as well. But we're dreaming big. We're talking about partnerships that come in and don't just, have a space on a wall to promote a brand, but actually take a proprietary interest in what is now the mission of this facility, which is to lift up the community and impact students. And that's the best part of my job and role in life. And I get to do it with other smart people. Mari, Lance Lopes doing design, Rob Johnson. And, we've quietly begun the fundraising campaign. We're about halfway to our goal. And so we're quite optimistic that this is going to be a really fantastic project, and perhaps not as big as our waterfront, but another really nice addition to what's going on in the city.
And do I have it right? You modeled this to some degree off of a soon-to-open stadium in Kansas City, the first stadium solely dedicated to the women's professional soccer team?
Yeah, and I think what's happened is the design. One of the challenges in RFP is you can't talk to anybody. You can't talk. We couldn't talk to the school district. And then once they came to us and said, well, we're good. We accept your nobility here. We started talking. And so, for instance, the Rain, they needed probably 20,000 seats. They needed suites, and they needed hospitality. They needed lots of things. And I think everybody was saying, how do we get this to work? But it was not possible in that footprint. And so we've toned down some of that and tuned up other aspects that are going to accommodate what I call Friday Night Lights. And, our school district serves 47,000 students. Those students deserve good news. They deserve hope. They deserve the same sort of community entrepreneurialism that's happened in other parts of our city. And this is going to be one outlet, not the only outlet, but this is going to be a shot of good news. When people start to really realize what we're trying to do here and the impact it could have on students, not just playing games, but attending games, but producing games and learning about technology and some of the expertise that we can bring to bear to show them that. And that all goes back to the first question you asked me, because I was that kid. I was a kid who didn't have a lot of hope. I was poor. I knew I wasn't being well educated. And the thought that some of those students would walk through that building and see the world just a little bit differently, it's a pretty cool thing.
That's terrific, and glad to have you all and your expertise and the approach you're taking leading this effort with the district and the city to bring something great, something that's great to the center campus.
It is our pleasure.
So Pete Carroll, the news of his transition a few weeks ago from the Seahawks, you were there 14 years ago to announce his hiring. What was going through your head when you read the headline or heard that Carroll was no longer the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks?
Boy, he did a hell of a job. And everything the man had said 14 years earlier. And one of the great things about the journey of life is you can have mentors. And, it's not all you. Just look at what other people have done and say, all I got to do is replicate that. And so when Pete stood up that day and made a series of bold pronouncements, I did watch it again just for the heck of it, and it was amazing.
Just recently?
When it was announced he was leaving, I watched that first day because the Seahawks actually released that. Yeah. And, his pronouncements that day were bold. Some thought over the top. And fact is, everything he said that day, he did. So there was an incredible track record for both he and Jon. Again, applauding ownership. That tandem was together for longer than any other. 14 years. Who would have thunk the day he was announced, if you'd have taken the over-under on that with those in attendance at the press conference, how many would have picked 14 years is the man's tenure. And he is a guy who gets out of bed every day and says something good's going to happen today. I'm not sure what, but something good is going to happen. And that's how he then got players to play perhaps better than they otherwise might have, because he found that ingredient of lifting others up. He wasn't everyone's cup of tea, but he was mine. And I just love the man. I have deep admiration for him. As I was interviewing him for the job, he's pretty stoic and pretty, enthusiastic. And then we started talking about his foundation called A Better LA. He would drive through Watts going back from USC or to USC, and one night his assistant pulled over and they got out of a car and started talking to these guys. They had seen him on the same corner, and he pulled over. And that was the seed of an idea of, what if you could go into these tough neighborhoods and take some of the tough people in those neighborhoods and send them through a transformative learning process. So then he came up here to Seattle and met a guy named Lou Tice, who was a renowned national educator, built curriculums, and Lou had a place in Winthrop. So Pete and his team went over there, and that's where they incubated this idea of A Better LA. They literally they raised money with the support of the police, social, religious, everyone. They then sent these people through a mentorship program and an educational program and paid them salaries. And somebody once said, if there was an ag in the sports section of Live Save, Pete would be in first place. That's some heady shit right there. Pardon my language. But that's the privilege. And you want him to win on Sunday, but he's already winning. Like, to take his platform and to carry that level. And it was during the interview, that's when his eyes watered. He was talking about that, and I'm like, wow, he is the real deal. And he is, and he was, and he will be.
And you think that was his part of his secret to success in the NFL, is that he took that mindset of caring not just about the player, but about the person that he had in college, and he was able to continue to have that mindset in the pros. And do you think his style of coaching and leadership was still unique relative to other professional coaches?
People all over exhibit those same behavior traits, like you. Okay, how was it running the DSA during this time when national media was just beating the heck out of us? When you had a divided city council, when people were talking about defunding the police when we were already officers down, it was a hard job. But you put forward a face of hope. Whether or not you totally believed it all the time doesn't really matter. You consistently were a voice of hope in the community, and you're unique. So there's people like Pete all over the place. They're here in the building. It's one of the best parts of the human spirit, is seeing things and seeing opportunity and not seeing things and seeing the negative. There's certainly other people who would rather vest in the negative. I pray for their souls and try not to hang out with them.
How do you ensure you're an optimistic leader but not a naive leader?
Well, a phrase for that is toxic positivity, right? I think humor plays a role in being positive, where you make fun of things that we know are bothering us or that are conspicuously awkward. So humor plays some important role. But I'm 64, and I'm not going to. It's too late to reinvent anything, and I'm just going to do what I'm doing. But I'm not. I don't think I'm extraordinary or unique. I think there's lots of amazing leaders all over the place, and some of them get no acclaim, and some of them are doing some of the hardest work in this community relative to the social services and other things. Any day that I hold myself up as being I'm not, I think that there are incredibly noble men and women who do it every single day. Teachers, firefighters, case number 1 for COVID was here, and we had a guy whose brother was one of the paramedics who went into that nursing home. And I talked to him one day, and they knew the peril of walking in. They knew that there was something that had infected that nursing home that could kill them too. And they went in and they transported patients. And that's a heck of a story. It happens all the time. And I think the more we rally around that spirit of honoring people day in and day out, that's what truly builds community. And I think there's a lot of that here. And it's not just first-line responders and people doing community work, but I think there's extraordinary things that happen in our city every single day, and that's why I love living here. When you think about the intellectual capital that this city just has on the streets every day, this city fights so far above its weight class in so many different ways, but we've kind of let people beat us up a little bit. They complain about the weather. And we saw it recruiting players here. Those players had perceptions that were fed by people who have never been here.
Not just about the weather.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Just one last question on leadership. Is there a quality you think every leader must possess outside of courage? So take courage off the table. But is there a singular quality you think every leader has to have to be an effective, successful leader?
If you read about Winston Churchill, he was a diagnosed manic depressive. And he battled depression his whole life. Yet he showed optimism and hope. They were literally bombing London overnight consistently. And his approach was, it's not working. They're going to have to come door to door. Bring it on. And so positivity and he was battling intense depression and chemical imbalances in his brain, but he found a way to be positive and create hope. And, I talk about positivity as a discipline, and I think if you're going to be a leader, you have to be positive because no one followed someone negative. And I know I sound like Mr. Happy Guy and Mr. Go Lucky, but, I can feel my negativity, and I do on a daily basis. Things bother me just like they bother anyone else. But I have tried to practice positivity, and it is a discipline. And one of the techniques is never forgetting where you came from, because my problems are someone else's dreams. If as a kid you'd told me, here's going to be your problems, I would have thought impossible. But now, day in and day out, they're problems, especially when you lose your perspective. And so I think that's an important thing, is being positive.
You've worn a lot of hats in town across a couple different franchises, being involved with the start of the Sounders, of course, Kraken, your time at the Seahawks. Do you have a favorite Seattle sports moment that stands out, whether you were directly involved with it, in it or not?
To be honest with you, and this is going to sound a little corny, I love interacting with fans, but I especially love interacting with our line employees who welcome our guests and are so predisposed to smiling. And so being positive, I get so much energy just walking around the building, and it's great to see the fans. And I love our fans, but I have a special love for the people who work day in and day out to the buildings. The people in the same sections who greet our guests by name, who no matter what the outcome of the game is, tell people to have a good evening on the way out. And they are not just in our building, they're over at Lumen Field, they're at T-Mobile, they're everywhere, and those people are everywhere. We have a Starbucks here, and every time we go over there, they make me smile, and I always thank them for keeping me caffeinated and extending my career. And so, to me, those are, and certainly they're big moments. The NFC Championship game where Paul raised the 12th man flag. The Colorado game for the Kraken, the first Sounders game were largely A-League, a lot of A-League players playing in front of 45,000 people. I'll never forget that. But I'd say the day in and day out, I get a charge from that every time I'm in the building.
You said a couple of years ago the question you got asked the most was what was going to be the name of the team. Well, we got a team name now, obviously, been on the ice for 2 seasons. What's the question you get asked the most now? I've got a hunch, but what is it?
The team name was painful, by the way, because it's an entirely...
And it wasn't your top choice, right?
Well, the first time I heard it, I was like, but the thing I kept doing is asking fans what they thought. And the problem with the challenge with that whole process is you couldn't do focus groups. You couldn't really put names up and have people react because... leaks have brought down lots of big ideas, and especially around things like this. So we had to keep the process super confidential. I didn't do set focus groups submitting names, but I did focus groups every single day asking fans what the name was. And when they'd say Kraken, I'm like, what is it? And then eventually people really sort of led me to the conclusion, it's not something they're really envisioning. It's the mystery and it's the theater of the mind. So then as we moved towards that name, we basically said, we're not going to draw a monster or it's going to be something that just alludes to some force and some secret hidden mystery under the water. And, and I can tell you that name isn't what we chose. It's ultimately what the fans chose. And when you have great brands, they're brands where you hold up a mirror and the fans see their image and their likeness and their values. And in this, I think we got it right. But I'd say the number one question people ask outside of that is, when are the Sonics coming back?
And what do you say?
Soon.
I like that answer. I think others will as well.
I can tell you this, that this town deserves to have the NBA back. This town's ready for it. Our arena's ready for it. Our arena was built in a custom way to accommodate the NBA. The sidelines are as good as any other arena in the NBA. I think Mr. Ballmer's building something truly extraordinary in LA for the Clippers. But our arena will be one of the top NBA arenas in the league. We'll never get in front of the commissioner, but I think the day that they come back, for many people, the soul of this town gets complete. I think they left in the dark of the night. It was a sad time and people were morose, but I think as time has marched on, people realized how big the loss really was. Our first professional team, all of the history that walked out to the door with it. And the Kraken have never tried to be something in place of the Sonics. I think we built a great fan base, and it might be a fan base unique a little bit to what the Sonics are about, but there is nothing that will replace the Sonics. And when they come back, we will see an amazing welcome here, and that's a franchise that will have the ability to dream big dreams.
Do you think Seattle gets its due respect as one of the great sports towns in the U.S., given 750,000 folks? I mean, 12th largest media market or thereabouts, but the number of professional sports teams that we're so fortunate to have here, and hopefully with NBA coming back, and the level of support that we're able to generate.
You might have heard my phone ringing. It was Adrian Hanauer, and I'll call him later. But I think this is unquestionably one of the greatest sports towns. And what is that? It's people willing to buy in. I think we're different than other towns in that when people come here, no matter where they're from, they want to be a part of this. And so they tend to buy into the team. And, we have people who live here from Boston, and I think many of them are wearing Kraken jerseys and the Bruins jerseys somewhere deeper in the closet. And I think that's part of it. There's a passion. There's a uniqueness. It goes back. It's generational. When people first came here, this was the absolute end of the road. And where I grew up, in the St. Louis area, it was more, they were like, they packed their goods and put them on the wagon and said, hey, write us when you get out there. Good luck with that. And people came here, had this adventurous spirit, and I think that's always been true. And it still lives in really the vibe of this community today. I think we're different, we're unique, and people feel it, and it gets expressed through the fandom.
Yeah, it's amazing the numbers you all put up with when you opened the season tickets for the Kraken. When you have 32,000 or something like that put down deposits immediately. The Sounders in their first season had
and the
set the record for attendance.
Loudest stadium. Yeah. The ballpark is T-Mobile's one of the greatest ballparks in the world, and they filled it. And this past summer, was there a better environment on a summer evening in Seattle than to have that roof open? And the Storm are the leaders in all of the WNBA. And I think when the Reign, now they're getting settled here. Their ownership has been sold, and there's a rumor that the Sounders are going to be deeply involved, and that's a fantastic thing. So sports are healthy here. I'm pulling for the Huskies to get realigned under Jed, but it's, sports are healthy, but it's a reflection really of the community and the community's passions. And people here do things, and they go out, and they don't let a little rain bother them, and it's a really hardy place.
A couple standard questions as we conclude. First, what was your first job that you took a paycheck for?
I washed dishes.
Where was that?
That was at the Wilderness Lodge in the little town I grew up, and then I moved on to wait on tables and moved on to do other things. And if we had another 45 minutes, I would tell you a rather bizarre story about that. But
can you do it in 45 seconds?
No, we don't have enough time. We'll and I think if we had a little wine, the story would be a little better.
Yeah, we'll do this at night next time. The number of dishwashers that have been on our
That's, every day somebody's washing dishes, and why not you?
Yeah. So, how long did you last? I lasted 2 weeks.
I did it my whole, I eventually ended up cooking in a restaurant. And so and then it became a second job. So you could work in the day and work at a restaurant at night. And I worked my whole life. I worked from the time I was 16. I actually took that first job when I was 15. So I've worked my whole life. I should have retired 25 years ago if years of service mattered.
So final question. What's your perfect Saturday in Seattle? We'll make it a little broader, Pacific Northwest, because I know you get up north to the islands too. So you can make it wherever you'd like. Your Saturday, beginning to end.
Yeah. Well, I'm getting up a lot earlier these days. So I used to be somebody who liked sleeping in, but that's not. But I love our city, and there's so much to do and see in our city. So I love Queen Anne. There's still a lot to explore. I'm doing a lot of trekking these days and walking. But you can walk down to South Lake Union, get on a seaplane, and be up to the San Juan Islands. We have a cabin there. I flew a brother up who's from New York, and we were flying up, and we saw 2 pods of orcas. We got up. There was a stellar sea lion on the dock. It was just incredible, and he was just like, oh my gosh, this is just amazing. And part of what we try and do with our players is promote that there's this incredible world around us here. 3 national parks within a 3-hour drive. This is an incredible place. It's the best place in America to live. It still has natural beauty. If somebody wanted to go hike a mountain, you drive 40 minutes outside of town. It's just an amazing place. So there's an abundance of things to do, and that does create competition. But you see that, hey, somebody could go climb Rainier or go to a football game, and they somehow find time to do both. And so there's days are fulfilling here, and there's just so many good things. I am looking forward to opening the cabin up, because I would say there's nothing like going up there to watch a Kraken road game. Build a fire, have a glass of wine, turn the game on, and life's good.
That sounds pretty good.
I do want to say that you've done a heck of a job, and I know you've been asking me questions, but I think the DSA has really, really been important, especially in what's happened. Our downtown still needs a lot of work. I think we have a city council that is more united than it's been in a long time. I think we have a mayor who has a lot of energy to do this, and this was his time. He has been a phenomenal partner to us. He is going to bring the NBA back, and it's an exciting time, and I really firmly believe that our best days are in front of us. I get a little defensive when I hear people, whether it be the weather, and that's easy, but when they start getting into, hey, is it safe there, or is it – we certainly have issues, but lots and lots of cities have issues. We also have the will to make things happen here, and when you talked about Memorial Stadium, it's really a nice thing we're doing, but when you look at the civic actions of people who fixed Lake Washington and built so much, there was a feeling of civic – and I think the city has it uniquely. I was involved way back when in the United Way, and we had one of the largest campaigns in America, 13th largest market, but I think we were the number 2. When you look at the giving to institutions here and other things, we are unique. And it still lives. The gift that was just made by Melinda Gates and the extension of the waterfront and the trail. There's so many positive things happening. You just have to open your mind up to that and be positive. Take those positive pills. But I really appreciate, Jon, what you've done and the leadership you've shown, your resilience in fighting for downtown, and pushing for the right things, because our downtown is our economic engine. And it needs work and it needs help, but I see it improving, and I think I'm one that really believes the mayor's done a heck of a job.
I share your optimism, and I think we've got the right team on the ice, so to speak, to continue the progress.
Look at you, man! See, I feel like we're getting there with
wherever. Yeah, the court. Yeah. We've got the right team, and my theory has always been I think the secret sauce of Seattle is if whether you're born here or you found your way here or found your way back here, like you have, you generally don't want to leave. So there's some self-interest in making this better for yourself and your kids and the next generation. And I think that's Seattle's secret sauce. We sort of realize that we've got a pretty fortunate spot in this world to be surrounded by this natural beauty and smart, creative people and this great city and environment. And let's all work together to make it better.
Well, if you don't like certain things you see, look around and look at the other things and then say, let's fix the things you don't like, because there's so much good here. And we really feel that. And I think that, The arena's been a very positive thing. The team's been a positive thing, and we only think we're just beginning. So there's more to come.
Yeah, and I've stolen your line repeatedly that I think Seattle's best days are ahead of us. And so thank you for being so gracious in the middle of the season here to make time for this conversation.
My pleasure.
And for what you've done, but more importantly, how you all have done it.
Thank you. Super appreciate it.
Well, hope you enjoyed my conversation with Tod. He's one of the good guys and compassionate, effective, and humble leader. And we're lucky to have him back in Seattle doing what he's doing with an incredible team and bringing hockey to our community and incredible community and social impact. And what we hope is an NBA team and our Sonics being back. So couldn't have a better person at the helm to make that dream a reality. And he says soon, and we'll take his word at it. So thanks to Tod for making time to join us on Seattle City Makers. I want to close out with a recommendation of something to check out in downtown Seattle. And a couple here. One, I want to plug the Downtown Seattle Association's upcoming March 7th State of Downtown event over at the new Convention Center Summit building. We'll be back in their gorgeous ballroom with a jam-packed program of speakers and a jam-packed ballroom of 1,200 or so business and civic leaders. Go online to downtownseattle.org and register. Hope to see you there for the reception program and the post-program reception at the Convention Center. And speaking of the Convention Center, I want to highlight Wild Rye Bakery that opened in the ground floor corner spot there at Olive and Boren in the new Convention Center building, along with Pike Brewing, Monorail Espresso, Proshki, and of course, Ethan Stoll's Bombo. So a great number of food and beverage outlets now open in the Summit building there, tucked between 9th and Olive in downtown Seattle. So go check out Wild Rye, the new bakery on the corner there. Well, thanks for listening. Drop us a line if you've got ideas on guests, feedback on the show, or questions about downtown and what the Downtown Seattle Association is up to and our priorities. Would love to hear from you at info@downtownseattle.org. Thanks for listening. Seattle City Makers is presented by the Downtown Seattle Association with support from James Cito and production by Spark Creative.